Well, good evening, Spirit and Truth Sanctuary, and welcome once again to our Wednesday night study series in Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. It has been a fascinating journey so far, and tonight will be no exception. Looking forward to hearing from you as the deep things in me call to the deep things in you. If this is your first time at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary, welcome to an inclusive spiritual community that recognizes God bigger than religion, bigger than race, culture, sexuality, country of origin, political affiliation, any partial system that we are watching crumble around us at even as we speak. And we are also a spiritual community that understands we live above label. The labels of race, religion, culture, gender, all of those things really, as Dr. King would instruct us, must become secondary considerations. He actually referred to these as external accidents. I'm accidentally male. I'm externally white. These are to be secondary considerations. What is the main consideration? That we are spirit. We are all spiritual beings having a human earthly experience. We are spirits, as Sting might remind us. We are spirits in the material world. Welcome to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. We'd love for you to download the notes tonight and your event description. Follow along with us if you'd like to. Will you take a big deep breath with me tonight? As we take and give this sacred breath, we are in recognition that emptiness is better than being full, that the unknown is better than the known, that I don't know is better than know it all. We celebrate tonight the beginner's mind. We walk into the kingdom curiously, inquisitively, as little children. We choose tonight to acknowledge that the universal Dharma, the universal teaching door, is open to all. As we empty our cups, we know the Holy Spirit will fill it. As we eat the daily bread, we know that the Holy Spirit will provide manna each and every morning. We celebrate tonight the beginner's mind. We choose mystery over mastery. Amen. And so it is. Welcome to Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. What an awesome day we had this past Sunday. I told Brandy it was just like a day of bliss, joy, peace, righteousness, illumination, connection, resonance, frequency, similar vibration. Had so many people come and tell me, D.E., there's no way that message could have been for anybody but me. It was for all of us, and seemed to strike a chord. Even one of our newer members, Miss Jo Vayuri, who was working on her doctoral dissertation, was like, D.E., even the quote you use from Viktor Frankl is in part of my doctoral dissertation. Just an unbelievable moment. We're glad that you're joining us tonight. We know that you're not here by accident. We believe that we attracted you here. We are good people. We are open-minded people. We are open-hearted. We are progressive thinkers. What does that mean? We deserve each other. Your steps were ordered to be here. You're hungering and thirsting for righteousness. Maybe you've been to church too many times, maybe not enough times. Whatever the case is, you're not in church. You're in a spiritual community that sees God, a bigger and better vision and version of the awesomeness of God in, through, around, and as us. This is our prayer of surrender, also known as an invitation of truth, just the way we say, let's get this party started. Come on, let's read together. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will, bring to me what you will, take from me what you will, awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me, the Christ mind is in me, the Christ power flows through me, and the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it, I perceive it, now I receive it, I am surrendered. Amen. So it is. I had a chance this past Friday night to see Lionel Richie and Billy Joel in concert. It was a wonderful bucket list experience for Brandy and for myself. The opening act was Sheryl Crow. If you're not familiar with Sheryl Crow, she began as a backup singer for Michael Jackson, then kind of found a few hits into the top 10. All of a sudden, she's an icon, but just a very deeply person who feels things very deeply, who thinks beyond the surface. In one of her songs, I sensed she was giving her autobiography talked about her father marching with Dr. King in Birmingham, and then mentioned a name, threw out a name, Aldous Huxley. One of the lyrics in her song says, the year Aldous Huxley died. Aldous Huxley was one of the authors, one of the minds that comforted me along my way. This is, you can see inside this book, it says D.E. 2009. So I read this book, The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley, over 13, almost 14 years ago. And it was just an amazing connection for me. This book was written in 1944. Aldous Huxley was from England, but he was able to find a common thread, which he called the perennial philosophy, in all religions, all cultures, all areas of what we would consider both civilized and even indigenous or aboriginal areas, that people have a similar spirit that's curious about worship, about connection, about being at one with God. The perennial philosophy really boils down at some point to Meister Eckhart's encouragement that we are that which thou art. We are made in the image and likeness, Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, made in the image and likeness of God. We are created creatively by our Creator. We have the same characteristics, the same DNA. And so it was interesting how this book found its way into a Sheryl Crow concert. I came home and started rifling through my bookcase. I knocked books over tonight and messed up LaDonna's artwork. She calls this art, the way she arranges my bookshelf. But I'm gonna look through this book again. If you haven't read it, it's Aldous Huxley, The Perennial Philosophy. Would encourage you to do so. All right, let's jump right in tonight. Last week was an amazing week. We are still bumping into some ubiquitous themes, such as being able to identify our own dysfunction, that the groundwork of sanity is the willingness to recognize insanity. Possibly the greatest achievement of the human race is the ability to see ourselves, to step out, become that divine observer, to recognize that what has been being worked is not working, and to finally land at the only question that ever matters in our lives, and is it working? On an individual basis, is it working for you? We talk about being woke. I just wrote both a 100-day devotional and 300-day devotional called Fully Awake, 365-day devotional called Fully Awake. And the idea of being awake really has to begin on an individual basis. Gandhi reminds us, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Michael Jackson would say, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. The New Testament would remind us, looking into a mirror or letting a man examine him or his or herself. Being able to be self-actualized, self-aware. Socrates might exhort us that knowledge really begins with one idea, to know thyself. And so we can know philosophies, we can understand some of the external world, but until we tap in to a comfortability and a surrender of acknowledgement to the internal world, our inner workings, why we think the way we think, really the knowledge that we have is just information. It really doesn't become wisdom yet. And so wisdom of the ages and sages begins at home. And so that's where we begin again tonight. Lao Tzu reminds us, if you want to awaken all of humanity, awaken all of yourself. That's wisdom from the Tao Te Ching. Another theme that we continue to run into is this idea of identification. How do we identify ourselves? How do we make identities of other people that really are just momentary lapses in consciousness? How are we identified? By our possessions, by our accomplishments, our careers, our thoughts that become thought forms, our opinions, even our physical forms that are fading and changing as our bodies age, the color of our skin, our physical makeup, our gender, our genitalia, all of those things are physical form that we become identified with. We've talked the last couple of weeks about being aware of not making someone's temporary state of ignorance into their eternal identity. As we all have journeyed and grown and gone into new places of our own selves and souls, we can look back at our own expansion and unfoldment and evolution and know that the way we used to think is not really who we are. It was just a thought that we were considering in that season of our lives. And so as we grant that forgiveness to ourselves, that's not who I was. It was just a silly season. We choose to grant that love, that goodwill, that empathy, that connection to others. We choose to say, hey, even when I bump into someone who's in a lower state of vibratory thought, I choose not to make that into their eternal identity. In other words, their present or current condition is not necessarily synonymous with their eternal capacity. Can you swallow that? Yeah, even your family members, even people you meet in an elevator. I was talking to a close friend a couple of days ago who was in a southern state, but was born in a northern state, and was bemoaning the fact that her family's southern consciousness and connection to certain ideals was very foreign to his upbringing in a northern state, his mother's upbringing. And so it is an interesting exercise in openness and in thought discipline to engage with someone who we might perceive to be ignorant, or at least operating in an ignorant vibration, but not to assign to them an eternal judgment as in an identity. They are not those thoughts. They are the mind capable of having those thoughts. All of the human family has the capacity, the potential of fully waking up just as we do. And so we talked about that a little bit. Last week, specifically, we talked about the difference in relative and absolute thought. We gave you a thought progression, relative or somehow related to a Kabbalistic thought, and that is that we begin in absolute or concrete thought. Everything is black and white. The religious mind usually is trapped there in literalism, the literal interpretations of the Bible, of the Quran, of the Bhagavad Gita, of the Torah. All of that is the literal, absolute, concrete mind. It is the lowest level of thought progression. From there, we begin to ascend into abstract thought. In abstract thought, we begin to recognize contradictions, that the same writers tell us one thing, and then they find themselves in the polarity, in an opposite extreme. We begin to say, "Ooh, if Jesus says a rich man can't enter the kingdom," but then also teaches that if we don't learn to invest our money and receive interest on it, that we're cast into darkness, which one is Jesus? And so we begin to rightly divide the word of truth and find our way, as Buddha might instruct, as the Apostle Paul might instruct, into that moderation, into that middle way, into that noble path that doesn't allow itself to find itself into the extreme expressions of thought. That's abstract thinking. The next level, we begin to see to find a mystic receptivity. We begin to surrender to the mystery, that we're not trying to end up somewhere. We're trying to celebrate the present moment. We're not trying to figure out the answers. We're really celebrating the questions more. We are learning that in that wilderness from Egypt into Canaan land, that in the wilderness we must eat the manna, the mon, the whatness, the question. And until we eat the question in the wilderness, we can't arrive in the promised land. And once we're in the promised land, we don't need the answer because the answer has always been within. That's mystic receptivity, learning to celebrate the mystery, not the mastery. And then finally, finding our way or unfolding our way into spiritual oneness as we find the Christ in us. We celebrate that same expression, maybe called the Krishna, in someone like Mahatma Gandhi or the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha nature or Buddha mind in Thich Nhat Hanh or in the Dalai Lama. We begin to realize that the thing that we call one thing has no name. It is the I am that I am, the eternal spirit, that there's only one power, one mind, one blood, one connection in this universe. And we begin to surrender to the fact that even though we may want to segment or segregate that spirit, that it's all one spirit, called very many different things. One river, but many different wells. From that, we actually ascend into a little annex in spiritual oneness. We see the oneness of all humanity, the interconnectedness, the interbeing, the inescapable web of mutuality that we're all trapped in, that we also are connected to Creator, to Source. That if we come from Source, if we are made by divinity, then we are divine. We have divine nature, even though operating at times in lower human and sometimes even worse, animalistic, survivalistic type nature, that we are divine by nature. And in that oneness, we don't sense separation from each other, from the self, and we don't sense separation from God. There is only God. God is all there is. God is evenly present throughout the universe and expressing as us. Those are the thought progressions we went through last week, which led me to want to remind you of this quote. And I know time is just going crazy. I'm going to go through it quickly. This last quote from last week, I had to give this to you. It says this. Eckhart Tolle says, some Christian mystics have called it the Christ within. Buddhists call it your Buddha nature. For Hindus, it is Atman, the indwelling God. When you are in touch with that dimension within yourself, and being in touch with it is your natural state, not some miraculous achievement, all your actions and relationships will reflect the oneness with all life that you sense deep within. Whew, that is a lot to chew on right there. That perennial philosophy, as Aldous Huxley might remind us. Martin Luther King, a single garment of destiny we're all tied into. Thich Nhat Hanh, interbeing, interconnectedness. All right, week 17, we're going to transcend a little bit into a little bit more talk about the ego. And the statement is this: the ego is not personal. The ego is not personal, meaning when ego takes over your mind through thought form or physical form, it's not a specific attack of the ego that singled you out. It's a collective thing. The ego is no respecter of persons. It just wants a home. It just wants to find a home in absolute thought. And so we're going to talk about the impersonal nature of the ego tonight. Here we go. On a collective level, the mindset, we are right and they are wrong, is particularly deeply entrenched in those parts of the world where conflict between two nations, races, tribes, religions, or ideologies is long-standing, extreme, and endemic. Both sides of the conflict are equally identified with their own perspective, their own story. That is to say, identified with thought. Okay, so I'm going to skip around a little bit because the introduction was a little bit long tonight, but I want you to look at that first sentence of the second paragraph. It says, both are equally incapable of seeing that another's perspective, another story, may exist and also be valid. I want to stop and do an exercise that might stretch us a little bit tonight. Okay, if you are a Democrat, if you vote down a Democratic line, and I think most of us probably are open enough to say, I don't vote for a party line, I vote for an individual, but we probably have leanings. Most people are politically one way or the other, but yet still convoluted in some way with a Democrat has some conservative ideas. Most conservatives have some liberal notions about things. So it's hard to really pigeonhole anyone. However, if you are a Democrat, I want you to just step back from a minute and ask yourself if you can understand some Republican ideas, some conservative concerns, and can you empathize with kind of their perspective to some degree? Okay, the other side of that would be, if you are a Republican, can you find yourself at some points connecting with some Democratic ideas? If you're more conservative, can you feel something at some points tugging on you saying, I think this is a point of common ground that we can find? If so, that may be the first crack, the first breakthrough, the first place that allows us to understand the necessity of seeing another's perspective, and that our perspective isn't the only one that exists, and is also not the only one that is valid. Look down a few lines. It says this: both sides in the dysfunctional insanity of absolute thought, here we go, both sides believe themselves to be in possession of the truth. How many of us are really in possession of all of the truth? I'm going to read this next little part, and then I'm going to do a little exercise. It says, both regard themselves as victims and the other as evil. And because they have conceptualized and thereby dehumanized the other as the enemy, they can kill, inflict all kinds of violence on the other, even on children, without feeling their humanity and suffering. They become trapped in an insane spiral of perpetration and retribution, action and reaction. All right. So here's the here's what I want to give to you tonight. This is another way that I messed up my bookshelf tonight. This is a globe, and it's actually not a complete sphere because it has a little flat place on the ground. But just for purposes tonight, let's pretend this is a perfect sphere. Okay, I tend to envision at times God as a sphere. Okay, or the idea of God, or even consciousness or awareness. We find in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, which is one of the most famous books in, scriptures in the Bible, is chapter 3, written and popularized by Simon and Garfunkel. There's a time and a season for every purpose under heaven. Okay, time to kill, a time to heal, a time to embrace, to refrain, a time to pluck, a time to plant, a time for war, a time for peace, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, all that. Okay, we see all these extremities and polarities. Then all of a sudden, at the end of all of that binary, of all of those opposite thoughts in juxtaposition, we find about verse 14 or so, 14, 15, and 16, Solomon says this: there's nothing new under the sun. That which was has already been, that which will be has already been, and God causes history to repeat itself. Woo! That's a lot, which in essence is saying there's no such thing as time. Time is an illusion. There is no time. There's no such thing as 2022. There is no beginning. There is no end. Can we leapfrog into the description of God? Woo! Come on, Revelation. The beginning and the end, the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, he who was, she who is, that which is to come. How can this consciousness be the beginning and the end at all times? When you begin to realize that God is not linear, God is cyclical, or I even like to say spherical. Why does history repeat? Because there is no time. It's all happening in this kind of vacuum of continual perpetuation. And so, in that way, I kind of see God as a sphere, that it is equal at all parts. It is continuing to revolve, and we can only watch this. I can only see a certain part of it at one time with my finite eyes. So in this idea, come on, ego, let's put a big slap on the ego right here, okay? In order for me to see God from a complete perspective, I have to trust what you are seeing on this side, because I can't see it right now. And so in that surrender, there really is a defeating blow that we give to the ego that says, I don't see it all. Someone else's perspective may be valid. Even if I don't agree with it, perhaps the way I see the fullness of God as a Christian is seeing the perspective of a Buddhist. Maybe the way I see the totality of culture is as a Democrat seeing the perspective of a Republican. As a believer seeing the journey of an atheist or agnostic. Wow, isn't that a beautiful idea? It takes a lot of humility to get to that space, doesn't it? All right, so let's look down at the next paragraph. It says, here it becomes obvious that the human ego in its collective aspect as us against them is even more insane than the individual ego. So in other words, the individual ego becomes self-centered, self-absorbed. My way is the only way. But then when that is collectivized or conceptualized in a collective consciousness, it becomes us, those who think like me, against everybody else who doesn't think like me. And that's when the collective ego becomes much more dangerous than the individual ego. Now Christians must crusade against Muslims. Now radicalized, literalistic, fundamentalist Muslims must declare jihad against anyone who doesn't agree with their caliphate. All of these ideas become more dangerous when they become a collective consciousness, us, not just me, us against them. Isn't that how religion exists? By both finding camaraderie with those who believe like us and then finding common enemies. How do we even have church without common enemies? Either the devil or the devil's work in other religions That's how we find these vision statements. Go into all the world, convert, convince, corrupt. Yeah, that's how religion finds its bread and butter. All right. Look down at the next paragraph. It begins: greed, selfishness, exploitation, cruelty, violence are still all pervasive on this planet. When you don't recognize them as individual and collective manifestations of underlying dysfunction, of mental illness, you fall into the error of personalizing them. So in other words, greed, exploitation, it's not just one person, it's not just one race. There is a collective consciousness of this thing. You construct a conceptual identity for an individual or group that says this is who he is, this is who they are. Remember, someone can operate in a lower vibration without that becoming their identity. It's just their current state of consciousness. When you confuse ego that you perceive in others with their identity, it is the work of ego that uses this misperception to strengthen itself in us. We begin to feel superior. We begin to react with condemnation, indignation, even anger against others. And so the lesson is respecting the journey of others. Can we stop here for a minute? Because all of us at one point were children. At some point we will become adults. Many of us are parents of children who have become now adult children. And so how do we make that shift? How do we shift into telling a child what to do and then as that child becomes adult, to engaging that child with their perspective? If that shift is not made, there will be a breach at some point. And that breach is not accidental. It may be ignorant. It may be hiding in the land of the unknown because of self-absorption. But it is not accidental. It is intentional. It is the intentional work of the ego to break apart parents and children, because parents, in their desire to have or to project their parental fantasy, need to tell a child instead of listen or engage an adult child. And so whether it be career, religious connection, relationships, there must be an engagement, even with an adult child, that we are willing to see their perspective, even if we're not always in agreement with it. If we don't show that respect, at some point, the relationship will become obligatory on holidays and family gatherings, but it will not go deeper than the surface level. Wow, I hope I'm learning. I'm in the process of learning this wisdom right here with my adult or becoming adult children. All this is enormously satisfying to the ego. It strengthens the sense of separation between yourself and the other, who's, watch this, otherness. They're not like me. They must be other, and at some point put into a caste system of importance, difference, segregation, separation. Eventually we will justify violence or some type of at least discrimination or disenfranchisement of some point, has become magnified to such an extent that you no longer feel your common humanity. Wow, I'm so different from you. You're not even human anymore. Sound familiar? Civil rights, human rights? Yeah. Nor the rootedness in the one life that you share with each human being, your common divinity. There's Aldous Huxley's perennial philosophy. Hurt can also, watch this. So let's talk about otherness, making someone different than us, separating, segregating the human family. But what about hurt? Hurt that is not healed, can that separate the human family? I was a few weeks ago, maybe over a month ago now, speaking at a national ministers conference, and one of the ministers who was sharing in a daytime session said that she was using the name God or the affectation God in her teaching, and someone came up afterwards and said, "I have a problem with you using the word God," and she said back to the person, "You do have a problem." Yes, you do. You have said rightly. Sometimes in religious science, New Thought circles, we use phrases like vibration, mind, consciousness, all that is, whatever. It's all phrases used for God. But what this teacher identified in this parishioner was that this hurt needed to be healed. She said, "I use vibration all the time. I use mind. I use connection. I use consciousness resonance, frequency. I use those all the time, but anytime I say the name God, this person gets hurt again. It's not mine to not say that word. It's that person's job to start healing over that. When a hurt comes up, it's time to heal. A couple of years ago, I'll just share a little bit of autobiographical anecdote with you tonight. I was in a kind of a roundtable discussion with other inclusively minded ministers. And we were talking about broadening the table of inclusion to those who were curious, to those who weren't quite at our place in the journey, but that it was time to open. And so I just said, I'd like to throw out a few names of some people I think that might not be where we are, but there's some evidences of them starting to open their mind to a bigger vision and version of God. And one of the ministers at the table was a lesbian minister. And she really came at me very strongly. D.E., we're not doing that. This is not your decision. And I said, I just made a suggestion. She said, well, the reason you would even make a suggestion like that is because you come from white privilege. And I went, damn. Just coming all at me, knives pointing. I made a suggestion to be more inclusive as you want to be included, but you're talking through your hurt instead of through being healed. What wisdom do you have to share with us when you're living in hurt? Hello, LGBTQ plus community, my friends, my comrades, I'm an ally. Yeah, and so she said, well, let me tell you why you come from white privilege. And she went to lectured me about the struggle and all this. And I said, okay, I've listened very carefully to what you said. Listen to me for a moment. I may come from white privilege, but I choose to be here. I am not homosexual. I'm not bisexual. I'm not transgender. I'm not black. I'm not brown. I was born into a middle-class white family. I am male. I am straight. I am middle-class American. I am Christian. At least the Christ mind. I said, the difference between you and me is you have to be here. I choose to be here. You have nothing to lose. I have everything to lose. So you may say I'm not part of the struggle, but I choose to leave my privilege to be here. And if you want to continue to talk to me disrespectfully, you're going to lose an ally that chooses to be here. And there was a holy hush in the room. And we had to come to that confrontation together. How was she speaking? She was speaking through the filter of hurt. I, as a lesbian woman, have been hurt by ministers like this. I've been hurt by the church. Yes, you have. But as a leader, now we must heal. Okay, it doesn't mean get over it. It means get through it. And then open up that door to those who are starting to learn, even if their terminology is wrong. Even if some of what they say we might consider not as political or offensive, there is a moment that we must heal and then transcend and begin to engage and include. It was a great learning experience for me and for her. And it's interesting how watch this, even in the civil rights struggle, we can formulate a caste system of otherness through our hurt. The hurtful memories of our past, the things that we feel in our present, those scars that are choosing not to heal in our minds. Can hurt even cause otherness? You think, well, no, I'm hurt, I'm a victim. I'm the one that has been discriminated against. Okay. Is your ego holding on to that hurt and now becoming exclusive of those who have hurt you? Wow, there's a lot of, that's a sensitive place there, isn't it? Yeah, it's difficult. All right, let's skip down, if you will. Look at about 3 lines down. It says, in that sense, you have much more to learn from your enemies. In other words, the enemies are bringing up things in us that need to be seen, that need to be healed, we need to be aware of. Jesus said, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who spitefully use you. Can I say it this way? You are the sandpaper that I need to smooth my rough edges. As we resist what we find in others, okay, either some sense of ignorance, obstinance, prejudice, bias, misogyny, xenophobia, homophobia, something that we see in others that we resist, what is it reflecting in us? What is it telling us that we need to be aware of in ourselves? And so those difficult, unsavory individuals become the sandpaper that help us even smooth out our rough edges. Wow, get them hands up and tell them thank you. All right, the very last paragraph says this. It has nothing to do with who the person is or with who you are. When you meet someone who's a difficult personality, It has nothing to do with you or with who they are. It's just a momentary place of unconscious thinking. It is a moment that the ego provides to us to become aware. And so even in that perspective, listen to this, the ego can become a friend. When the ego rises up and we want to defend, we want to be reactionary. Say, thank you, ego. You're showing me a place that I need to work on. We step out of the thought. We become that divine observer that's aware of the thing. You watch this. Last sentence says, only if you mistake it for who you are, can observing it within you be threatening to your sense of self. So even when you see something in you that is still a place of difficulty, that is a place of judgmentalism, of condemnation, a place of feeling superior to other people's trains of thinking, only if you think that's who you are does it become damaging. You have the thought, let the thought come to you, then let it flow through you. Your thoughts are not who you are. You are the divine observing presence of the thought, which means I am not my thoughts. I'm the spirit capable of having thoughts. Even my lower thoughts, I'm not those things. My present thoughts are not synonymous with my capacity. Can I say that one more time before we open it up? Your present thoughts, my present thoughts, in no way are indicative of my potential or capacity, which is unlimited and endless. We're going to actually add that in to our affirmation tonight together. All right. We've thrown out a whole lot of stink. Let's talk tonight.
So earlier, I just thought I'd mention this. If we're not sure exactly what you referenced, we can go back and listen. But Joy Powers asked what scriptures were that, but it was much earlier.
Was it? And so, I referred to, I was quoting a lot in Ecclesiastes 3 earlier, talking about the time that which is will be, that which is will be has already been. God causes history to repeat itself. That is actually taken from the Amplified Version. So if you want to see that, Ecclesiastes 3, about verses 14 through 16, Joy, that's in the Amplified Version. But I kind of throw out so many scriptures when we talk. If that's not it, maybe reference what you're talking about, or give me a few words, and then I'll try to remember what the scripture was. I love it. Thank you. Study to show yourself approved.
Mm-hmm. And then Miss Irma said, and I think this is kind of unpacking some family experience here.
Good, yeah.
She said, I think the ego is personal, especially among family members, where someone always has to be right, whereas the other has to be wrong. The one person who believes he or she does not nor cannot control the situation always states, it's always about me and I am always wrong. It doesn't matter if you are trying to agree with their perspective because they have shut you down. I have learned to walk away from a toxic situation while it is happening because hours later clarity happens in both parties, but only if both parties are willing to try to understand the perspective of the other. And you have to use discernment, Irma. That's your agency. Don't give that away. Don't give that decision. I'm so glad to hear that you're learning to use that individual power. What's the rule here? Can we get some good Jesus gospel teaching here, Irma? Don't cast your pearl before the swine. Okay, and that doesn't mean Jesus called them pigs. We don't want to make someone's thoughts into their identity. Their present consciousness is not their eternal capacity. Okay. However, there are moments when the thing in you, the pearl of great price in you, is so precious that you cannot share that with those who can't comprehend it. What happened to Joseph? Joseph with the Technicolor dream coat. He shared a vision, a dream that was to come true. He did become second in command in Egypt. But he shared it with brothers who weren't ready to hear it. And they turned, as Jesus said, they turned and rended him. Jesus said, don't cast your pearl before the swine, lest they turn and rend you. That literally means, from the King James, it means tear you into pieces. Joseph's brothers tried to tear him into pieces. Sometimes family members won't put their hands on you, but they'll put their tongue on you. They'll criticize your character. They'll say, well, Irma, what do you know? I watched you grow up and blah, 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 saw all these mistakes you made. And so, unless there is an open door, don't share that pearl of great price. The Apostle Paul said, there are many things I still want to teach you, but you can't bear them now. The Apostle Paul, John the Revelator, talked about being caught up into
higher places, seventh heavens, walking in this kingdom consciousness with spirit. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, John on the Isle of Patmos, and I was caught up, and the Spirit showed me things to come. Sometimes you can't share all of those things. They're not lawful, as Paul would say. It's not lawful for me to share it with you. What does that mean? It's not means it's illegal. It just means there's no openness here. We read a couple of weeks ago at church when Jesus said, if you enter a house and it's not worthy, okay, remember that? We talked about that. If the house is not worthy of your peace, your presence, your understanding, leave the house, wipe the dust off of your feet. In other words, every house can't accept your peace. Every house is not in your vibration. Doesn't mean that that's their eternal capacity or identity. It just means probably the greater part of wisdom is not to share those precious mysteries with someone who's still kind of stuck in an absolute way of thinking. That's really good wisdom. Thanks, Irma.
Bobby Howard shared, the ego has a superiority complex with such a bold attitude of always thinking he or she is right. We can't take its opinion to heart or take it personal.
Isn't that where, Bobby, the ego can become a friend? How bizarre is that? Yeah, even sometimes ignorance can be the groundwork of awakening. Yeah, self-absorption can cause so much pain that it leads to self-actualization. I heard someone say one time, or maybe it was just the Spirit within me, I don't remember who said it, maybe it was just Spirit talking to me, but that pain is the only teacher we ever really need. I don't think we have to learn from pain. We can open up a portal as we celebrate beginner's mind emptiness, as we open the conduit of the channel that is always available to download the truth that exists in the universe. However, that's not how most of us learn. We learn from either experience or from tragedy, or at least by observation. And so as we understand that pain is maybe not the best teacher, but the most prevalent teacher, we don't have to learn those lessons twice, but give thanks. Give thanks to the ego. Give thanks to pride. Give thanks to jealousy. Give thanks to insecurity. Give thanks to rage, to vengeance. Why? If you can step out of that emotion, you realize this is not who I am. It's not who I want to be. It's not who I am eternally. And I'm willing to stand in the place of observation and see myself that this is not who I am. I'm better than this. And so we give thanks even as we experience that same strain in others. Thanks, Bobby.
Alita shared the song by Frankie Beverly and Maze, We Are One, is playing in the background of my mind.
That sounds like a little Cedric the Entertainer at the Kings of Comedy in Charlotte, North Carolina, saying, I like the old school Frankie Beverly, Maze. Yeah, that's some good stuff. Living just enough. Oh, that's OJ's, I think. Yeah, that's good stuff. We Are One. Who was it that sang Peace Train? I think it's OJ's. Or maybe it was the Manhattan Players. I don't remember. If you know, throw it out to me. Help me out. But even songs like Peace Train, We Are One. We are all on this same love boat, this same ship, this same... Hasn't that been around forever? It showed its head in the 60s, turned back around, showed back up in the 90s. And now we're getting back to that place where there is a chasm, a schism, a divide in our nation. But even, listen to this, even in this great political divide right now, there is an awakening consciousness. There are bearers and bringers of the new mind that say, I don't want this. I don't want to live in extremes. I don't want to live in hatred or intolerance. I want to learn to live with my neighbor in a loving, beloved community. And so we even give thanks for those. You know, in Hinduism, there is a thought with both karma and reincarnation that sometimes those people are our teachers. And we should give thanks for them, even those who commit heinous crimes. I know that's difficult to chew on, especially if you've been victimized by that. But that they are our teachers. I have a book, I don't think, it might be on a different bookshelf somewhere, but it is called Sacred Contracts, written by the author Carolyn Miss. And in this book, she lays out the argument, or at least the idea, that what if we choose to come here? What if we choose to play a specific role in the earth? And that in this role playing, we are to learn from each other. And so our difficult family members perhaps become our greatest teachers. Wow, isn't that interesting? That maybe our greatest abusers are those who are here to teach us the most. You know, there's a passage in the Old Testament, and if you send me an email, I'll find it for you. I think it's either in Chronicles or Kings. If you follow Chronicles, Kings, Samuel, there's some similarities in those three books, even some, almost like the Synoptic Gospels, there's some repeating stuff. But there's a conversation where God is wanting to confuse King Ahab. And the depiction that we get in the Old Testament is that God is in a heavenly host in a conversation with other spirits. It doesn't say heavenly spirits, evil spirits, it just says spirits. And God says, I desire to confuse King Ahab, to overthrow his throne. Who will go for me and become a lying spirit in his mouth? And a spirit steps forward. This is not Apocrypha. This is not Gnostic Gospels. This is King James canonized Old Testament. Talk to me, people. A spirit steps forward and says, God, I will go and become a lying spirit. In other words, it's almost as if this spirit has this sense of neutrality. I can go and be a guardian angel, or I can go and be a lying spirit. I can be whatsoever you want me to be, God, I can go and do it. I'm every woman, it's all in me. Yeah, anybody? Whitney Houston? I can be, God, I'll go and be anything. In other words, Carolyn Miss is saying, what if that spirit chose to come here to be a lying spirit in the mouth of King Ahab? What? To set up a new government. Can I take you New Testament? Y'all ready for this? Y'all ready for this? Ready? The Apostle Paul, Romans chapter 9, and then again he touches on it in 11 and 13. Predisposed vessels of dishonor that were chosen to be here, to be sinful, to not believe, to do what? To help the vessels of honor understand. What? And in that same conversation, Paul says, so how can we find fault with Pharaoh, the Egyptian tyrant, dictator, czar, if you will? How does God still find fault with Pharaoh if God hardened Pharaoh's heart? What you say now? Shut your mouth. So you think you got God all figured out? You think you've got good and evil all figured out? You think you got your judgments and your condemnations all ready to cast on somebody? No, you don't. You don't know God. You don't know the mind of God. Where were you when God hung the stars in place? Where were you when God set the planets in? To what did he attach its orbit? Come on, Job, talk to me. Yeah, so how do we know that our ignorant father, our neglectful auntie, our abusing cousin isn't playing some role to wake us up? We don't know that, and we don't want to allow people some level of autonomy to just abuse us. Irma, of course, we got to use personal discretion and set boundaries. But in everything, give thanks. For this is the will of God concerning you in Christ Jesus. In everything, not in good things, not in pleasant things, in everything. It's all good. It's all working together for your good. Give thanks for your abusers, for your accusers, for those who neglect you. Why? They are showing you the ego that resides in you. Now punch it right in the face and walk away from it. Give that ego a big punch and say, I'm not living in hurt. I give thanks. I'm learning to be self-aware and self-actualized. Get healed tonight in Jesus' name. Talk to me.
So I'm going to come back to this a little later, but I just want everyone to know who is channeling the devotional from earlier this year. For those of you who were able to participate every day, and we had just, 60 to 80, 90 people every single morning. What did we do some of the days? We had our little music trivia.
Throwback Thursdays.
We had our music trivia, and everybody is just correcting all of your your artists and your songs tonight.
I asked for your input in that direction. I engaged you in a conversation.
No, it's funny. I love it that everybody. It's like they're just channeling the devotionals. We'll come back to it.
Coming soon.
We'll come back to it. Yeah. No, I'll read all in a moment. Let's see. Richard shared, "I have met the enemy, and it is me." He put that as a quote. "I have met the enemy, and it is me." What we often perceive, become aware, understand, feel, or observe in others is usually who we really are ourselves.
Isn't that difficult? I don't even know if my ego can take hearing that, Richard. I teach it. You just said it to us again. Whew, isn't that hard to feel that? What we resist in others, we resent in ourselves, or that there's a deposit of that in us. That's so difficult. Think about this. The same thing in a racist is resonant in the person who will not heal from being disenfranchised. That's difficult. So, in that essence, Richard, a white man who discriminates against a black man. Okay, if the black man or man of color or a person who is discriminated or abused in some ways, if they do not heal from it, they become hateful toward that white man. So in essence, the hate begins to grow in the victim as well as it is in the victimizer. The hate in the abuser is now transmitted into those who are abused. We become the thing that we hate. Oh my goodness. Isn't that why Dr. King said, love is the only thing that can transform an enemy into a friend? What if the enemy is you, Richard? What if the enemy is not out there, but that transformative, that transmuting love, that alchemy can transform the enemy that is me into a friend? I become my friend when I choose not to hate anymore. I don't hate the homophobic. I don't hate the racist. I don't hate the misogynistic. I don't hate the religiophobes. That's my issue. I don't hate someone of another political party or affiliation. Why? Because if I hate, I become like them. Maybe in my own issue, in my own narrative or my own platform, but I still become hateful. I become reactionary. I become defensive. I become militaristic or militant. But as I forgive, as I live in the present moment, I choose not to become the thing that I hate. Wow, that's a jagged pill. We got to swallow that thing. That's perfect, Richard. Thank you.
Laverne shared, holding on to hurts from the past can hold us back, not only for family members, but others around us. It's like a sore that doesn't heal. I'm talking from experience.
Yeah, that sore that doesn't heal, don't we love to pick at it? I'll admit something gross. Sometimes when I get a scab, if I get anxieties, I kind of like, if it's not healing fast enough, I kind of like pick at it, try to help it heal. Then I just mess it up. It just makes the scar worse. My son gets that from me. We both pick it. We just make the scar worse. How do we relate that emotionally? We keep knocking it off. Just keep knocking that scab off. There's a season when you really are injured deeply that the stitches have to heal. The sutures have to be removed. And then even for a season when the stitches are removed, you still feel like if I got hit on that spot, it might open up again. But then eventually, when the tissue does completely connect, it's not going to open up again. It's just a little sensitive because it's scar tissue. And so we choose to be cognizant of our past. It doesn't mean that we get over it. I certainly don't want to say that from a white man's perspective. I don't say, or a straight person's perspective, don't get over it. But we do get through it. We choose to heal so that we don't repeat the pains of the past. That's really good. Thanks, Laverne.
Jason shared earlier, short comment, but just amen. We can't put God in a box.
Yeah, it's isn't it interesting the definition we try to place on God, Jason? I asked a person several years ago. They asked me, what are you teaching from? What is the Torah? They thought I was teaching interfaith, and I am an interfaith teacher. But I said, no, Torah is just the law of the Old Testament. Oh, I didn't know what you're talking about. They were just talking to me from ignorance. They hadn't studied. And so I said, let's tone down the rhetoric a little bit. Okay. How do you understand God? Is God male? Is God, hopefully we're all adults, God has a penis? God has testicles? God has a flat chest, doesn't have breasts? That's the human image of God. That's us creating God in our image, isn't it, Jason? I wrote one of the papers I wrote in one of my classes doing my master's work for theological studies was a comparison in the Hindu god Ganpati, or when we celebrate Ganesh Puja, which is the depiction of an elephant head with multiple arms, like 4 or 6 arms. The Christians get all freaked out. That's an idol. That's idol worship. Okay. Well, in the Old Testament, God is described as Jehovah. What is it? El Shaddai. You know what El Shaddai is translated as? The God of many breasts. If you go back and find ancient archaeology, you find the depictions of El Shaddai like balloons, just breasts all up, not just 2 breasts. I mean, like 20 breasts all over. And the writer wasn't saying God has 20 bosoms. If you will, can I be clear? God has 20 titties. Amen. No, he's saying God is able to feed you endlessly. There is no lack of nurturing and love and acceptance and provision and so, but think about this. But if we look at the Hindu God with many arms, that's an idol. But if we see our own biblical description of God, El Shaddai, God of many breasts, well, now that's okay because that's in my holy book. Wake up. God is above definition. Isn't it interesting? Both in the book of Daniel and in Revelation, John the Revelator's depictions of God, we get these 4-headed creatures that are divine. There is the face of an ox, then you turn it, the face of an eagle, turn it, the face of a man. How are these angelic beings all around God? I thought the Hindu depictions of a God with an elephant head was of the devil. So in other words, God, the devil head is, the elephant head is of the devil, but the head of the ox and the eagle, that's okay, that's Christian. Think about how ignorant we are. How arrogant we are to say that we understand God. And because we read it in our holy book, we can now assign an identity to Hindu followers that their God is false and our God of the eagle head is the true God. How arrogant can we be? Humble yourself under the mighty hand of God. Moses said, God, what is your name? I don't have a name. I'm not going to let you put an eagle head on me, an elephant head on me, many arms, many bosoms. I am that I am. That's all you need to know. I will be what I will be. Woo! Isn't that amazing? Look at God. Thank you, Jason.
All right, so we're at time. I'll share a nice comment and then these songs. So Abdullah, who joined recently, wrote in, no question, but I recently joined the church on the 2nd of October, the anniversary. I truly believe I vibrated myself to this family. Yeah. Very happy that I joined.
Isn't that amazing? It's not fatalistic. It's vibratory. I don't believe in fate. I don't believe we're connected to a caste or karma or fate. I think we can choose. We choose peace. We choose to create peace. But vibration is powerful, isn't it? That means that we found each other. We were vibrating in the same wavelength, above race, above religion, above gender, above sexual orientation, and we said, maybe these like spirits do attract. We're so glad you're here. Welcome to the family.
All right, so of course your sister, of course, she was chiming in, saying at the very beginning that Turn, Turn, Turn song is actually by the Byrds, not Simon and Garfunkel.
Sorry,
okay.
Yeah.
And Peace Train, Cat Stevens.
Turn, that's right. Yeah.
Peace Train's Cat Stevens, and actually Jen Stevenson wrote in, the Google says Cat Stevens.
No, not Peace Train, Love Train.
I know. Well, Peace Train was by Cat Stevens.
Join hands, join the Love Train, Love Trains. That's
okay. We got answers on here. Miss.
Is it OJ's?
Yes.
It is OJ's. But yeah, sure, right. Peace Train is Cat Stevens. Yeah, Cat Stevens, what an amazing Sufi Muslim. Yeah, so what else?
And so Miss Myrna wrote in, Peace Train was Cat Stevens as well.
Peace Train.
And then
Cat
Living
Stevens,
for the City was Stevie Wonder, LaDonna said. Anyway, I just thought that was funny.
For the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was
we'll be back
another one.
doing our devotion next year.
There's another song about the city. I thought it was something was OJ's. Maybe that's New Jack City I'm thinking about, but that's my Wesley Snipes infatuation. Anyway, this was great tonight. Thank you guys for being a part of the discussion. By the way, just a little shameless plug. We will be back. We haven't decided exactly how the format will be yet, but LaDonna and I have completed a 365-day devotional. So we have a devotion for each day of the year. I don't know that I have the stamina to do 365 days in a row, or neither do you. But I think we're going to pick some specific days of the week that we'll join together and do our devotion. Excited about sharing that with you guys, and very grateful for my sister for helping me finish that, writing that while I was in the midst of writing my master's thesis, and so very grateful for that. Love you guys so much. I don't know if we have some shouts out tonight, Brandy.
Yes.
Yeah, let's give some love to some peoples tonight. Look at all these peoples. Live stream, YouTube, Facebook. Tamara, Emma, Rosaline, Alma, Ivy, and Margie. Got to talk to you guys on Sunday. So wonderful. By the way, Ivy, I think he gave me permission. He did give me permission to say he had a good report from his doctor recently about his heart, having a healthy heart. Ivy, we celebrate with you. Yeah, you're healed. Gloria, Sandra Mack. I saw Sandra Mack Sunday. It's so funny, Sandra. I drove in with Micah Sunday morning, and you were backing into your normal space, and Micah was trying to wait for you. I said, Micah, Miss Sandra does this every Sunday. Give her
Mm-hmm.
Just pull into another space. She's gonna get that car exactly right. I watch her do it every Sunday. We are creatures of habit, aren't we, Sandra? Pastor Fred and Mary, Myrna, Irma, Tanya, Sheila, Doreen, Toria, Michelle, Elaine, Jason, I think from New York. Dr. Ray Madison, I saw you on Sunday morning. Ben and Vicky. Laverne, Jen, Ethel, Reverend David, Michael, Kisa, Billy, Alita. Look at all these beautiful peoples. Callie, Jay, Bobby, Pastor Gloria, and Howard, Terry, Maud, Dr. Sharonda B., Donald and Dinah Garrett. You look so good Sunday with your beautiful son Brandon, just dressed in your fall colors, making all of us look good. I love you guys. Veronica, Josephine, Joy, and then it says music. Lover 88 from YouTube. Welcome, glad to have you. Love that pseudonym. Richard, and then Abdullah Bahir. Love that. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, please help me with it. But beautiful, beautiful name. We're glad you're with us. We love you guys. All right, I know we're past time, way past time. All right, let's do our closing affirmation. I did add a little bit to the affirmation as it's organically growing each week. Come on, let's talk. Tonight, I am willing to recognize dysfunction. If suffering is the normal state of humanity, I do not wish to be normal. If I have created God in my image, I will surrender to the truth that I am made in God's image. I am neither an external physical form nor any internal thought form. I am a spiritual being capable of experiencing physical form and the observing presence open to considering a diversity of thoughts. My present thoughts do not reflect my eternal capacity. My potential for awakening to self and spiritual transformation are endless. Amen. And so it is. We love you guys. Go in peace. We'll see you Sunday.